Well, good afternoon and welcome to this edition of Business Insights. My name is Lee Iben and I'm your host for this afternoon. And with me is Tom Rutkowski with E&J Geothermal, a 40-year-old company up in Solon. Tom, welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. So, Tom, this is fun. 40 years, I've been around long enough to remember when you guys got started. Um, However, geothermal is, I think a lot of people have heard about it. There's a lot of questions about it. We're growing in awareness, but it's not prevalent everywhere. So tell me why we all need to have geothermal in our homes, because I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, so geothermal, just a little background, it's been around for, as we see it now, let's say over 50 years. But it's going to be a more efficient, more sustainable, and then more comfortable way to heat and cool your home or your business. Doesn't have an outdoor unit, so we're not going to have any exposure to climate. So, i.e., if we get extreme heat, if we get ice, whatever, it's not going to damage any outdoor equipment.
Not like an outdoor air conditioner thing.
Yep, that thing's going.
Okay. Yeah, got it. Perfect.
Quieter outside. You're sitting on the deck. You don't got to hear the thing. From a commercial standpoint, a lot of buildings in like downtown urban areas, they're trying to really scale back, seeing large rooftop units. Cedar Rapids is one of them where they had units fly off in the derecho. So it doesn't have any of that exterior equipment, right? So everything that we have for the unit itself is inside the house. And then we've got a ground loop, which can come in a variety of different forms, as our method of heat exchange, right?
Okay.
So the ground itself is a very consistent temperature in our area from about 5 feet down to a couple hundred feet. There's only a couple degrees of differential temperature, but it's about 50 to 55 degrees. That loop has a solution inside of it with antifreeze, and then we're basically using the ground as a bank, right? So we're going to put heat into the ground in the winter or in the summertime. You build up that heat, and then when winter comes around, you have a nice mass of thermal energy built up to pull from.
So that air handler in your home pulls the air that's in your home currently and runs it through the geothermal system.
Yeah, so the air itself stays in the house, okay? That air handler has a compressor and a coil with refrigerant inside of it. And then that ground loop connects to it. So inside that unit, you have a coil with refrigerant on one side and then your loop on the other. And then when that thermal transaction occurs, it's just utilizing your ground loop as the method of heat exchange. And because heat moves easier, BTUs, a measurement of heat, moves easier through a liquid or a solid than through air, we have more efficiency transferring that heat into the loop and then also into the ground. So if you can imagine like a normal air conditioner, right? Inside your house in the summer, it's capturing all that heat, puts it in the refrigerant, takes it outside where it needs to reject that heat, basically into more heat. And that's why these air conditioners are getting so big. It's because to get the efficiency, you need more coil face with more air moving across it. With us, that ground loop's on the other side. And because you have a bigger temperature differential, it's like in the summertime, you have that heat built up. Because there's a bigger difference from that 50-degree ground to that loop temperature, that heat wants to move easier. So the easier that heat moves, the less the compressor will have for a load on it. And then you've got more efficiency on your compressor. So it's kind of from a variety of standpoints, but it's basically just a more efficient way of moving heat.
Sure. And so I would imagine there's a lot of prep work on the outside. I mean, how much space do you need?
It depends on the job, right?
Okay.
We'll put it this way. I've never found a job we couldn't get a loop into. The most prevalent in our area, for us anyway, is going to be a horizontal closed loop. So if it's new construction, we'll come in and we'll dig in what's called slinky, where you'll see a bigger hole. We build the pipe into what looks like a giant slinky, drag it in the hole, and then backfill.
Okay.
If it's a retrofit application, or if we're doing something in more of like a urban environment, then we have our own directional boring machine. So we'll come out there just like they do fiber on the side of the road and directional bore. And we can go right underneath the house if we have to.
So you're going down pretty deep.
We're going down anywhere from on average 12 to 15 feet. Starting after 19 feet is where the DNR steps in and says we have to have a permit. So
Oh,
if you stay 19 feet and shallower, you can avoid that and it frees up a lot of red tape.
okay.
Uh, and like I said, in our area here, from 5 to a couple hundred, you're only talking a couple degrees of separation. So once
Gotcha.
you're past frost, our ground is very conducive to geothermal.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And you guys are unique because all of your team is trained to prepare and place all the geothermal components.
Yep. Yep. So everything we do is in house. We don't
Yeah.
sub out any of it. So we've got our own ground team. We have our own boring machine, our own ductwork guys, installers for piping. We have our own electricians. So that's kind of nice, and that's kind of why it's our niche is we don't have to sub out anything, so there's no middleman fees.
Hmm.
It's also what makes us very competitive in the commercial side because these
Hmm.
guys that are going in, I have a few of them in particular where they're holding an HVAC license,
Hmm.
but in that HVAC umbrella, geothermal gets covered for the piping as well. So we can do a lot of this under one license.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I imagine you guys are busy. It looks like you guys are pretty busy.
Yeah, it's been a very interesting few years, that's for sure.
Really? So you mean since COVID or what?
Yeah, so well, in COVID, we actually had one of our best years because everyone was at home, wanted to do
Right.
home projects.
Right.
We worked through it. There were some hurdles in certain areas for sure. But when the residential side of things kind of slowed down, interest rates started getting up a little higher and new homes weren't going in, then our commercial side picked up.
Oh,
So the tax credits that are available right now are just almost crazy. On the commercial side, you can get up to 50% if you're in the right area back in
wow.
tax credits. And
Wow.
then you can double dip. So you can do tax credits. You can go after the deductions. So you can go after your 179D for energy improvement if it's an
Hmm.
existing building. And then you also get accelerated depreciation on the equipment. So I just did one the other day, a retrofit on a large building in Cedar Rapids, and the payback period after you incorporate the rebates and tax credits and accelerated depreciation, it made it a 1.8 year payback
Wow. Wow.
on what it was a 5 or 6 story building.
That's
So
amazing.
yeah, it's the commercial side's just an insane thing. If you're in a rural area, there's also a grant you can get from the USDA that would cover 50% of it. It's called a REAP grant. That
Okay.
Solar's been using it for years, but geothermal is part of that as well. And then on the residential side, you get a 30% federal tax credit. Depending on who you have for power, there's usually a rebate as well from them. And yeah, it's typically on a normal install. If you had to like replace your furnace and AC and it's time for you to explore something, it's usually going to be anywhere from a 1 to 3 year payback to put geo in.
Okay.
Once you're done getting everything back, from the government and from the power company, it's usually a couple $1,000s difference.
Right.
So yeah, just on the utility savings alone, you're going to get it back in a couple of years. When you put geo into the house, it adds $10,000 to $12,000 in equity value for the home.
Right
One of
off
the
the top.
right off the top, just by
Yeah.
putting the geo loop in, because they're giving you value for that ground loop, is what it comes
Hmm.
down to. There's no rhyme or reason for how much it is. It seems like the corridor area seems to have a little bit more than rural, just greener area. It's a little more
Right.
competitive. But one of the kickbacks for the state is you don't pay real estate tax on that for 10 years.
Oh,
So
really?
the average homeowner is going to move every, 5 to 7 years, I think they say.
Yep.
So if you are one of those people that ends up moving, you're just going to realize that equity quicker. And now your HVAC system actually paid for itself.
That's fantastic. That's
Yeah.
great. Why isn't everybody putting in geothermal? I mean, that's a great question, Tom. So here we are, a couple of business owners here. What's the challenge, right? What's the challenge to acquire those customers? Why isn't everybody putting in geothermal? What are those barriers that you see?
A lot of it comes down to other contractors. You've when we're coming in, we're kind of a niche. Our name's growing, but it's not as big as some of these larger
Right.
ones that have been around. And the reality is they're going after the mass, right? They're hoping to get in, slam in a furnace and AC, and move on to the next person.
Quick install.
Yeah, and they base their business models on volume, right? So they're not going to want to do anything harder. They're going to want to do things that are easier to make them more profit and move on. It's not always the best thing for the customer, but it's good for their business model. And that's what we struggle against is people are starting to think a little more, but typically it's, hey, my furnace is out. I have no heat. What am I going to do?
Right.
It's usually an impulse decision, and then they just go with the people that they've used for the last 10 years. And
yeah, it's quicker. It's easier. They don't have to think too much about it. I mean, I guess they understand it.
It's just there's a lot of education, and not just to the homeowner, but even us as an industry reaching out to other HVAC contractors. There's a lot of education that just needs to occur to get more people involved with it. Right. I think as that happens, we're going to see a more exponential growth, at least from a macro standpoint. But in the meantime, it's a double-edged sword. It would grow fast, but making sure that it's being done properly and not getting a bad name is the other key to this. So it's nice that the people that are doing it now are usually fairly invested in it, and you're going to get a quality installation versus somebody that really shouldn't be putting this in. They don't have all the qualifications, and then homeowners stuck with something that doesn't work that great.
Right. So. And that's why I'm sure you have continuing education for all of your installers so they stay up to date. And that's the advantage that you have with having everybody under one roof. You don't have to double check credentials type of a thing. Or hope.
Yeah, no, actually, I think right now, I think we've got only a few guys going through the apprenticeship right now. Almost everyone else is licensed.
That's fantastic.
And then we've got one of our office personnel here that will track it all for us. So when it comes time, she says, hey, you need 8 more hours of CEUs for this. And then we figure out where to go get them. But yeah.
So do you slow down much in the wintertime? Does the cold weather impact you much?
You know, it used to. In a traditional HVAC company, it will. You know, there's that rush, that first rush of, hey, it's cold, everything gets turned on and stuff breaks. And we get through that first rush. But then a normal company, you're going to slow down usually until spring. We've been slammed 24/7 for the last 8 years. I don't think, actually, no, we haven't had to lay anybody off for being slow at all. If anything, the guys are picking up more OT in the wintertime because now we went from doing a mixture of ground operation and inside operations to more or less straight inside.
Right.
But we're trying to get caught up in the wintertime to free up our schedule going into spring.
Absolutely.
So it's a unique problem, especially when we get into some of these larger commercial jobs. It's nice because now, hey, we've got our ground loop in. We're doing a cluster of buildings in downtown Cedar Rapids right now, but there's 3 large buildings. And all that ground loop is in, so now we're just going to move inside, and we'll be doing all that interior build out for probably the next 2 years.
Wow. That's great. Yeah, fantastic. All right. So you went into an industry that you need to educate everybody so they understand it better, which kind of feels like you're hitting your head against a wall some days, I'm sure. But tell me, but you know what? Every business owner goes through this. They want to change the world, right? And make it a better place. Most of us do. So what is your psyche behind all that? How did you personally get into this? What led you into this field? You could have been a baseball player playing in the major leagues, but instead you're doing geothermal.
Yeah, I've had quite the journey. So grew up on the northwest side of Chicago and went to Iowa State. When I got out of state, I was active duty for a little bit, and then I got out right in the worst part of the recession. And my dad had been in HVAC his whole career in Chicago. So I'd always been around it. And yeah, growing up, instead we'd go to hockey or we'd go to baseball or something. And then right after that, I'd have to go down and be with him in a high-rise building, and I'd learn from his guys how to work on a ammonia chiller or, hey, this is an oil burner for a boiler downtown. It was just stuff that kids usually don't get exposed to. So when it came up, there was a job opening at Colony, and this is 2009 or 10, something like that. Worked there for a while, did a whole bunch of everything, mainly in service, and ended up going from there to Climate Engineers. At the time, they were in Cedar Rapids and in the Quad Cities. I ran their service division for a few years.
Mm-hmm.
And then I ended up at E&J after that. The opportunity came up, and we'd done geo at both, and I'd been exposed to it because the tax credits had just come out, and it was kind of the new thing for everybody, so we all got immersed in it.
Right.
And then having that commercial kind of background, I've always had a little bit more of a hydronic side, so interested me a little more. But when it came up here, it's something that was intriguing to me because it's not just there to put it in and move on. It's something that benefits people.
Right.
And, at the end of the day, you want your work to matter. And I could really care less if someone's right, left, whatever. At the end of the day, it's a technology that works for everybody, and it really doesn't have an agenda. It's just a better way of doing it. It just works better. So being able to go into something that's a little more niche and then offering somebody a solution that's really going to benefit them is what gives you a sense of pride.
Right.
And then the kids that are coming up in the industry now, and we see it all the time. Every one of them coming here, I want to be an electrician. I have no idea what they want to do. They just heard it from somebody. But most of them, we float them around and then we get them into the field they really want to be in. But seeing them and hearing from them that it's important that what they're doing, they want to feel like they're doing something good. It's nice knowing that what we're doing is going to get taught on to the next group of people coming up and that they want to continue doing something that matters.
Oh, for sure. And that's completely Gen Z right now. They do. Their loyalty to a job or an occupation isn't what the loyalty was, say, 20 years ago or 30 years ago. They don't get locked in. They want that experience and they want to know that they're making a difference. And your organization, they absolutely can make a great difference, impact people, impact the planet from all aspects. It's great. Well, Tom, thanks. Give me some parting thoughts for someone who wants to, they may not have a similar journey as yours, but for even just owning a business, what's some of the things that they need to be aware of when they say, all right, I think I want to start a business. I want to go into, a service industry like this. What's something that they should know about?
Don't be afraid to fail.
Okay.
Before I did this and everything, it was very unique with the time I got out of the Army. So it was, like I said, worst part of the recession. I ended up working, actually, I was at a career builder.
Right.
So I was there cold calling people, asking them if they wanted to advertise for job openings in a recession. But I can tell you now that doing that, if you had to do like the worst possible, that was about the worst. There's no way you're going to do a sale. So getting through that.
But good experience, right? Good experience.
It was, you go through something that difficult, and when you go and do something down the road after it, it's not as much of a challenge. You think back to having to do that and okay, yeah, that's not that bad. Or if we walk in somewhere and it's like, hey, I got to tell somebody that they need a new electric service because this thing's from 1941 and it's unsafe.
Right.
Yeah, it's okay. This is the reality of it. And these are the solutions. These are financing options, and we'll get you through it. It's just a matter of getting it fixed. And yeah, you can't be afraid to fail, though. I used to race motorcycles as well.
Oh yeah, right.
So like sport bike racing went all over the country, and yeah, I've had a few wrecks, but that was one where it was like, okay, this last time that's just time. And you can't be afraid of it, though. You try something new, and you got to learn something from it and then grow with it. And you never know who you're going to meet. That's a big thing, too. You can learn the business side of it. You can go and you can learn how to physically run a business, or you can hire someone that knows how to do that.
Right.
But you've got to be the face of it on and off the court, right? So when you're everyone's so connected with social media now. So when you're out and about, you have to have that mindset of, hey, I'm really still at work. I might not be here, but if I'm open, this is mine all the time. And then networking and using that time. But you always got to realize that, hey, this is my baby. And that's something that you need to fully embrace. And if you do, it works well, because if you do it well and you're known for that, people will start coming to you instead of you having to go out to them. And it just makes life a lot easier. But
Oh,
you
yeah.
got to put in the hard work to get there first.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's great advice. Tom, thank you very, very much. All right, we'll just wrap this up real quick. Again, my guest today was Tom Rutkowski at E&J Geothermal. You can Google them. They're up in Solon, Iowa. They're right next door. And if you haven't thought of geothermal, you need to do that. If you don't know why, just watch this video again. Tom, thank you very much. Don't go away. Again, my name is Lee Iben. This has been an episode of Business Insights. Thank you all for watching.